the all agricultural acting of it.
Oh, Nolan's joining us.
Nolan.
Hey guys, I got other people on board as well.
Wow.
That's everyone. Hey, I don't know. I don't know why I got invited. I just answered.
You gonna take part in the sustainability meeting, Nolan?
What was that? Sorry, I got an engine behind me.
You gonna take part in the sustainability meeting?
Yep. Good thing. Go. Dee, by the way, you got Victorio and Eric are coming to you. We need to get Debbie's car down here somehow. I mean, Deborah's car. For the water testing at Charles Cove right now.
All right, cool. We're just gonna mute you, okay?
All right. Otherwise, yeah, you should listen to this motor the whole time. That's all I had to say anyway.
I think if Deanie could do a brief.
All right.
Intro
Now we're
about
now we're
what
starting.
we did yesterday.
Now that Nolan is muted and watching.
Sideways.
I know. I don't know why he joined. I guess I post to all coastal.
Yeah.
So anyone that's in coastal got a message that we were doing the meeting.
Oh, is that what my phone was just buzzing?
So my name's Constantine Macris. I am the director at Coastal Environmental Services. Coastal Environmental Services is a small local nonprofit in southeastern Connecticut based out of Mystic that we provide leadership to protect and preserve our oceans and coastal waters. We mainly run pump out boats, but I think the purpose and the reason that we're holding kind of this brainstorming session is to talk about not only coastal and kind of where our direction is and where we're going, but also coastal sustain. When I say coastal, I mean it in the sense of on the water now, not the organization. Coastal sustainability overall, because that is a big part of who we are. We think that the environment should be a major consideration in our planning, in our lives, in everything that we do. And what we want to do is reach out to other organizations, mainly push and say, what can we as nonprofits do to provide that leadership to pretty much shape the community and the coastline and the environment to be what we want it to be, not what the people that come here, will make it. So I guess sustainability in my mind, like a concept of a sustainable mystic, would be not allowing, the I-95 corridor to dictate what Mystic is. To have people come to Mystic for what we see its value in, the ecology, the river, the beauty, the fact that you can go out kayaking, that you can go swimming in the water, that you can eat no-ank oysters, right? We don't want that stuff to change. And if we can do things to bolster that and to increase the beauty and increase the ease of things so that they can, so that people can do the right thing easily, like we've done with the Pump Out program, then that's I think what we're here to talk about. Let's just go around and just do quick introductions. I guess we'll start with Michael.
Okay, so I'm Michael Harris, and I work here as an operator at CPS. I also have a background in renewable energy and sustainability, including having run a local Earth Charter nonprofit organization in Connecticut for a number of years. Sustainability has been sort of the lens through which I've really been expressing my life for the last 10 years. Very strongly about it.
Just a quick side note to that. Michael came to us through the Department of Environmental Protection for Connecticut. They noticed that he had applied for a position there and said, you know what, you probably would like it at Coastal more. So up till now we were like, Michael, we got to get you in here to start talking sustainability. So that's why we're another reason why we're doing this here today.
I'm a sustainable development graduate from the University of St Andrews in Scotland. and I'm really just here to contribute ideas, listen, see what you guys have to say, maybe throw in a couple things here and there. So yeah.
I'm Libby, and I'm also a Sustainable Development graduate from the University of St. Andrews, but I'm now working at CES as a development, fundraising, education, outreach coordinator. And sustainability has been something I've been very interested in throughout my degree, obviously, and I'd like to sort of shape my life around it more. This is great for me.
I'm Richard Chamberlain. I'm an officer with Cush, Vice President working with Fran Hoffman, who met her, and have been doing that for years now. I'm retired. I worked in New York City running a healthcare public relations firm for about 17 years. And I grew up in Connecticut, then moved to New York, actually much later moved to New York, and I spent most of my time living in the West before then, Montana, London. So I'm definitely into sustainability, whatever the definition is, and I'm very much focused on the environment. My daughter, who's now studying at Middlebury College, is into environmental science, and she's going into her junior year now, and she's very much into sustainability. So I hear that word a lot, but I'm not exactly sure how all-encompassing it is.
Great. Maybe we start there.
Well, I think Michael had some good pointers on kind of ground rules for brainstorming. So yeah, go ahead, because you probably have more experience.
Well, the first thing I was thinking about is like, what is to sort of agree what we're brainstorming about. I'll just tell you what I came away with from our meeting yesterday and what I thought we were meeting about, but that might not be what you guys are all thinking about too, so we need to mesh those. But really, we yesterday we were talking about the desire to identify other strategic themes for the organization that support what we know about our current vision, what our current vision is. And it occurred to me that really clarifying that vision is a starting point before we start trying to identify themes that would lead to that vision. So the idea to have a brainstorming session about our vision is what I understand this session to be. So brainstorming, though, is just, I just want to take a minute to emphasize the difficult nature of brainstorming, because we're so conditioned to be judgmental, to evaluate ideas based on practicality, feasibility, effectiveness. We sort of want to jump to the how before we even know what the what is. And in my mind, this is about the what. And it also, in my mind, again, I'm not trying to oppose this, but this is the way I think about it, is we're talking about an ideal. What is the ideal we're striving for? And we can give ourselves permission to really dream and really be imaginative about perfection, about an ideal that we would strive for, without having to feel that we're going to be judged based on whether or not it's practical or feasible. That's another session. So my encouragement would be, don't even try to go there today. Let yourself, because you need to get into the space of letting yourself off the judgment of both your own ideas and other people's too, because that'll shut down creativity faster than anything. So we can just be free to speak our ideals. What's most powerful for each of us in terms of an ideal that's related to this idea of sustainability and really being supportive of a vibrant life for both humans and the other creatures, other aspects of life in the coastal area of Mystic and Connecticut. So that's my ground rules is it's about what, not how. It's about an ideal condition that we're looking to bring forth, and that our judgments about practicality, feasibility, how, and effectiveness aren't welcome in this session. That doesn't mean they're not welcome, but they're not in this session. They're not. And appreciate that is a difficult thing to do. And just allow yourself to know that that's.
What are the other ones? What, not how?
Yep. It's about an ideal condition we're seeking to bring about.
Okay.
And judgments are not useful at this time.
So I guess as a starting point, and this does not mean that this is right, wrong, or whatever, shooting off the hip, was the vision of Coastal Environmental Services as it stands now. I already stated the mission is to provide leadership to preserve and protect our oceans and coastal waters. We've talked at length about kind of how we do that, what that means to us. Our vision, Coastal Environmental Services vision, is the development of clean coastal waters, a sustainable coastal life, and a vibrant green coastal economy. So, as broad-reaching as that is, I guess, say go.
Can I quickly say something? So, given how broad sustainability is and how context dependent it is, very sustainable can be the same as for your city, can be the same in Spain, can be the same in Scotland. And given how difficult it is to define, I will quickly, 3-5 minutes, draw out what you guys think is not sustainable. So what you guys don't want to see. I think it's more useful than trying to outright articulate what you do want to see versus wrong. It's a lot easier to look back and identify, oh, someone did this 10 years ago, which I really thought was wrong. And I think from there it might be a bit easier to go back and trace and say, okay, so this is wrong, that's really good. Is that?
Yeah. So kind of defining what we think sustainability is by defining what is not sustainable.
Because it's a lot easier to identify what isn't sustainable than what is.
Well, I'll jump in. From my perspective, having grown up in Connecticut, and I grew up in North Branford, right outside of Guilford, near Servicing. And that was a pretty pastoral community back in the early 50s. Farms were the norm, and small neighborhoods were just beginning to blossom. Baby boom generation coming to birth after World War II. And what was about a 4,000, 5,000 community to small New Haven now is suddenly what looks like one running right through. And when I think about what's here and what is just down the corridor of 95, this is kind of Connecticut's quiet little corner, coastal and beautiful in some ways, being threatened by the same thing that happened just further west of here. And the question is, in my mind, what will this place look like 20 or 25 years hence if the same urges come to this area?
So what is not sustainable would be like maybe an urban sprawl?
Yes, I think definitely urban sprawl. I think random development rather than very focused development. If it does have to occur, how should it occur?
To be like unplanned, how would you call that? Unsustained development?
I would call that
Unplanned development. And I think that we can talk at length about how that affects our community here. But.
And you can even have planned development, which is dramatically detrimental. And you can see that happening around here now.
Yeah, I would even want the opportunity to at least ask the question, is development sustainable?
In and of itself.
Is there such a thing as sustainable?
So I was just at a town hall meeting in Stonington about 10 days ago, in which they were presenting the 10-year plan of development and conservation. Now, those are two things that are not readily put together, development and conservation. But in fact, this 100-page document, which has been done twice now over 10 years, is just that. It's a document to meld the two beautifully together. And if you read that document, you will see what the town's people and town government values going forward. There's a lot of focus on conservation, but there's equally impressive focus on development and tax base growth.
I mean, I think it's evident that people want to be stagnating doing nothing. You want to really go what that looks like in time. So you know that. So I think the help we all understand that is necessary. The thing is, what can you do to make sure that you don't affect everything that surrounds your community?
I think that we kind of tiptoe on the issue of coastal development, in that the reality of the situation, and this is going against kind of like the ideal, would we all love it to be like, probably 50 years ago when there was not traffic like there is now, and so on and so forth? Yes. In my opinion, that as where we stand as an organization, Coastal needs to understand that there is a harmony and a synergy that needs to be obtained between humans and the environment, and there is a certain local beauty that also needs to be maintained in that same vein. Because if we said we want to make the most efficient means for housing people, that's not going to be Mystic. That's not going to be our community, because it's going to be high-rise apartment buildings that are very, very efficient and provide people with bed, water, all that sort of stuff. And it's difficult to kind of, and that's why I think it's difficult for Mystic, and that's why I use that term specifically, because Mystic is zip code. It's divided between Stonington, Groton. Stonington is divided between Mystic, Stonington Borough, and Pawcatuck. So even a Stonington
Plan of
conservation and development is going to reflect Stonington,
Right.
and that in and of itself, to me, is very different than kind of what I consider to be my home of Mystic. And Mystic is more than a zip code, is a brand, and it's a brand that people want to experience. It's the Mystic Seaport, it's the Mystic Aquarium, it's the downtown Mystic Merchant, it's the Mystic River. And I think what we don't want it to be is we don't want it to be like the Six Flags. I live on Route 27, right around the corner, and every morning at 7 a.m. when I walk to go work out, there's 18-wheelers blowing down the road. There's probably 500-600 people that are driving to work, one person in a car. There is a very, very stark difference between the one end of Route 27 and the other end of Route 27. And you can kind of see that there's no interest in those kind of two worlds. And this is all, even within Mystic, this is a 2-mile stretch of road. There's really no interest in those two worlds really connecting. But people want to connect. So what's not sustainable for us, in my opinion, is the idea that we have these quotas to bring people into Mystic with no means to bring people into Mystic. There's no plan to bring people into Mystic, other than get off that highway, get in there. The train station's right there. Is it being utilized? Somewhat, but is it a central hub for the town? Not at all.
Yeah, no, the 95 corridor. But those are the development urges to bring people in and out. And it's more every year. Feed the beast once you design the beast and leave it there. So
to build the aquatic amusement park, you need to make sure enough people go to the aquatic amusement park.
Exactly. And I think you can see what development is occurring and what is likely to occur in greater numbers once the economy resuscitates to a large degree. The next 5 years will probably put a pretty big imprint on what Mystic will look like 20 years from now. So I think the question is knowing what people really want, and is sustainability just a dream for them, kind of a bucolic 1950s scenario of what was, or is there a plan in place? And I think the towns, Groton has this plan of conservation and development as well. It would be very good to know what all of the local towns are doing. Stonington has one, the borough has one, Groton has one, and surveys, rather extensive surveys, were done of residents before the plans were put together. And the focus is wide-ranging. It's a pretty interesting document to read. The problem is, I think, from one decade to the next, it's a roadmap, but not implemented. So what was done in 2004 was a document that was written but never really enacted. And now 2014, it's mandated that the towns have these, state and federal government mandated. But what can be done is really driven by tax dollars, budgets, town budgets, and all the environmental components are lagging behind in many ways. So pollution, stormwater runoff, which is tragic, is not really addressed. There's no great infrastructure to supplement the hard infrastructure. The town is the big polluter, and the state is the big polluter in terms of dumping stormwater runoff and roads. But to try to get at that is to spend money that residents really don't.
It's old infrastructure. I mean, they just pulled up East Main Street, put a water main. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, they're ripping the whole street up for a week and a half, 2 weeks now. And they had trenches dug, they had water lines going in, they've been connecting the houses, they've been doing it, redoing it, and all that time they could have dug it all up once, taken probably 30% more money, and put in parallel sewer. And said, you know what, East Main's done. Let's connect it to 27 a little bit. Let's move it down to 27 so we can have parallel sewer so we can start dealing with some of the issues that the waste plants, like right now the waste plant can't handle the waste that's going in.
One of the things that was most interesting to me in the Stonington Plan of Conservation and Development was the population growth from 1950 to 2010. And it really accelerated in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and then has plateaued at about 18,000 for the last 20 years. But the really interesting thing is that the geriatric population is skyrocketing, and the younger population is almost zeroing out. It's incredible in terms of how those lines diverge.
From
Yes.
from a perspective from a young person that's trying to do business here.
Exactly, and I think that's the dilemma for sustainability. The younger people of your ilk are more likely to focus on being in a sustainable mindset and not damaging the environment. But while older people might dream of having that, they're also interested in paying fewer taxes and having more services.
Are old people not sustainable?
It's true, they're not.
I mean, I guess we could say that. Is Mystic as a retirement community not sustainable?
I think it's not a community if it's a retirement community. It's got to have young people, it's got to have young ideas, and you have to have opportunities for those people.
Right.
It can't be just a place to retire a guy.
I find it interesting to see, like, obviously, I guess, you guys are from here, whatever. I'd be interested to know whether the interests of, let's say, younger people want more sustainable, wording, however you want, future, could intersect with older people who just want to be in fees and have the 1950s. Like, could that intersect?
Utopian society.
Well, but aren't we talking about the same thing? Right? Don't they want something without traffic? Don't they come here because they don't want the rush of people? Then they come here because they don't want the message of the system.
Yeah.
And isn't that exactly what we were talking about earlier?
But
Maybe you can work something out around. I don't know. Like if that's the whole motivation, maybe that's what we should be targeting all about this. Is how to make old people and not just some people.
I'd be interested what the tax per capita is of a person in a retirement community versus a regular resident.
yeah,
I wouldn't know that right off the top of my head, because right there in what is not sustainable would be if the tax, the commercial tax, the business tax that's coming from a retirement community is substantially less per person than a family of 5, let's say, and then you look at wastewater, all these things that you have up by Quaid's, the new retirement community going in there, you look at what is not sustainable and have all the things, and I'm not up on the entire topic, but I can only imagine that there were no real concessions as to like water usage, how that's going to affect long range, 20 years down the road, wastewater, like you said, runoff. Like now you're cutting down all these trees. Same thing here. Look at all the trees. Like, and we're sitting here and we're banging our heads against the wall on how we can save the environment. And there's 5 acres of trees that just get cut down and chopped up into mulch. What's that doing? And you know what? There's swamp right there. Swamp. Wetlands that are right there. It blows your mind how development is moving, and that's a good thing, right? More tax money, but
there's probably a need within the Pawcatuck, Stonington, Mystic, Rothley communities to identify all of the environmental organizations that have slightly different missions, but the same overall objective: preserve land, clean water, access to public spaces and open spaces, and do something within an alliance that makes that voice heard in a much more significant way. Because individually, they're all doing their own thing, but unconnected to the larger, probably more encompassing and holistic vision that might be put forward.
do you guys have a rep at the Stonington Nonprofit Roundtable? Usually.
I don't know. Fran would know.
Keith,
Yes.
is there a Cush rep at the roundtable?
Yes, Fran shows up.
Fran usually shows up.
Also, question.
Yes.
Victor needs something from you for computers.
I don't have it. My house is locked. I don't have keys.
I can get in.
How? No. Tell him maybe go see Harrison, see if you can find a pie from him. Next one.
Go get a Raspberry Pi from Harrison.
Good luck. And that's maybe a beginning platform for bringing people together. I mean, how many environmental organizations other than us and Cush are there?
Well, there's Avalonia, I'm sure.
Avalonia, yeah.
There's another land trust as well.
Stonington Land Trust. Did it go?
So I wonder if I could
Dots.
redirect this a little bit. I want to make a couple of comments that I perceive. So when we talk about what is not sustainable, to identify the things that we don't want, I think it's important to remember we do that as a way to help us see what we do. That we actually there are reasons why we have difficulty really acknowledging what we do. One of the things I thought about us doing is actually literally meditating for a couple of minutes and then allowing ourselves to get in touch with what's most important to each of us on a very human level. And that we're not good at that because for a variety of reasons. And for example, some of the reasons I think that we're constraining our ability to be visionary because everything we're talking about so far is about the current paradigm. And my perspective on sustainability is we need to break the paradigm. There needs to be a new paradigm for sustainability to actually exist. And it may not even be possible, it may be too late. But if it's going to happen, it's going to happen through really affecting the deep roots of why we're not sustainable. So plans of development conservation, while they are an attempt at doing some of this, they also continue to be a lens of old thinking and the old paradigm thinking. And even if you limit your imagination of what an ideal looks like to our experience of what we think the 1950s was like, it's a very limited perspective. A more enlarging perspective would be to recognize that there's an ideal out there that is almost beyond our imagination, that we've never even experienced because we haven't yet grown that way as a species, in our ability to interact with each other and with the natural environment. So how do we get into a place of that possibility as opposed to letting our conditioned experiences sort of limit our imagination? So I've given this a lot of thought, and I came up with sort of a three-pronged little mantra that is, to me, is the roots of the issue, which is to deepen our understanding of why we're not sustainable. So this is the role of discussing those things. And not only the symptomatic levels, urban sprawl, unplanned development, dirty water, I mean, what's not sustainable is what's not conducive to life. That's, in sort of a bottom line way. So deepening our understanding about the nature of the economy we exist in that has a voracious appetite to commoditize natural resources and human relationships and turn them into money. And that is ultimately not sustainable. And so if we continue to look through a lens of, well, we need development to keep the economy going, we're going to be missing a huge reason why things aren't unsustainable. So deepen understanding, because that actually enlarges our ability to imagine something different. What if we lived in an economic system that didn't require infinite growth? Because infinite growth on a finite planet is an absurd idea. But yet, if we're afraid to speak that out loud, we're not really getting. But what would the world be like if we actually had an economy that didn't require that?
I mean, what's based on consumption?
Right,
Yeah.
where we could have a steady state where, like in nature, there are cycles, and what we consume is also food for some other process, and the waste from that process is our food.
Yeah.
And so that's not the 1950s, you know. That's not like anything we've ever experienced, although there are indigenous ones. We wanted to, talk about that, but we're in a different place. We have technology too that could also be turned in this direction in a way that we have difficulty imagining, because all of the technology invented so far has been in support of that old paradigm, a fearful perspective of not enough has driven our technology. What if our technology came from a place of love, of there's enough, of being a strand in the web rather than ideas about having dominion over these? If you start turning that upside down, the possibilities become enormous. And that's the possibility I was hoping that we could at least let sort of leak in a little bit when we talk about, so what would an ideal look like? Because then once we've painted this more feelingful picture of what could be, even though granted it's going to be limited in our ability to imagine it, it's going to start taking us to a very different place. And then we can talk about how we might have a role in bringing that ideal forward.
I'm better at that second part, I think.
Yeah, I know. You're really good at. That's why I'm excited to be here, right? Because I can try to speak this part of it, and then have somebody that's like an implementer that can actually find like ways to
Let's get some nuts and bolts.
Yeah. But I think that unless you get that vision painted first, the nuts and bolts aren't necessarily as effective as they could be.
Oh, I know.
Because they're disconnected from root causes. And maybe root causes don't become as important any longer because we suddenly see what life could be. And I have a question: is it Mystic or is it all of coastal Connecticut? We probably need to bound this in some way and say, but we are in Clinton and Brantford and Bridgeport, so maybe it is the Connecticut coast. And what we see, at least off the coast of Connecticut, in my mind, is this vibrant, alive sea that we can interact with in a way that's not destructive, that's actually mutually enhancing. Human interaction with the sea that is enhancing the sea rather than destroying it. And so that's my picture, that's my vision. But we all had similar ideas that we could meld, and we could then flesh that out a little bit. Then we could start talking about how to turn that into.
Do you know the only thing I'm thinking about right now was that video of the Morgan being used as essentially a whale watching ship under the power of the wind, right? And I think it's taking kind of what you were just talking about and what that, before even that 1950s utopian,
Weirdly utopian, but just not as damaged.
Exactly. Well, even before that, when it was like we were literally living off of, what the bounty of the ocean had built up for eons before we had figured out how to completely ruin it.
How can we do that, but in a way that doesn't ruin it, that allows it to continue?
And it was almost like that very odd moment where those two worlds kind of came together. Now, this ship that was boiling down blubber to light, lamps, 200 years ago, is now powered by the wind, going up towards Cape Cod and watching whales. And to me, to get to kind of the description that you were talking about of the world in which we're part of the strand versus owning the web is so far out that I need to take those little baby steps of it's just so maybe ironic or maybe just come full circle that
we can go from a 200-plus-year-old ship to now it's sailing again, of course, and it's being used for the complete opposite of what its original purpose was. And that's kind of, you know,
It's inspired.
it's inspiring on that kind of, you know, get you going on that.
One other thought I had, and I haven't heard these out, but just in the vision statement that you've created, I think there's some good guidance. I mean, we could just work on talking about what do clean coastal waters mean. That's part of the vision statement so far. What does a sustainable coastal like? What does that mean? What does that look like? And then a vibrant green coastal economy. What does that look like? So we could even spend time just sort of trying to flesh out the details of those three statements. And I think that would begin to achieve what we are hoping.
Yeah, I think those are good starting points.
Well, would you be willing to do the little meditative thing I suggested, which is just right now for each of us to get in touch with what we value most, and see how those might have a commonality as a framework that we can work inside of before we talk about these specific things. Is that? I don't want to hijack the meeting, but
Let's do it.
okay. So my suggestion would be to first everybody take a minute or two.
I need just 1 minute to get him. You all set now?
I'm good, yeah, I'm good.
Okay,
Sorry.
So the exercise starts with really just quieting your body and your mind so that when thoughts pop into your head, you're able to pay attention to them. So rather than be immersed in your thoughts, be able to observe your thoughts. This is actually an exercise in higher consciousness because you're observing your thoughts rather than being immersed in them. So take a minute or two to try to just play with that possibility, and I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to pay attention to what pops into your mind. A good way to get person is to pay attention to your breath. So take a minute just to feel your breath and notice if there's any restrictions. Is your breath coming easily, or is there a difficulty? And it's okay regardless of what you perceive, but just acknowledge it. That's a whole nother session to look at the obstructions to our breath. Just to be able to pay attention to it. Sorry. So the question is, what elements spring to your mind when you're asked, when you are asked, what vision of the future should CES be seeking to bring forth? And let your subconscious do the work here. What elements spring to mind when you are asked, what vision of the future should CES be seeking to bring forth? If you want to jot down in order to, I was hoping that we could go around and get a report back to everybody what immediately came to mind. Is that enough time? Do you want to sit with that for another minute? It's really very quick, actually. Did anybody get anything?
Stuck on the nuts and bolts.
Well, that's all right. Go with the nuts and bolts.
This is
Oh.
one thing. This is one thing.
Can I write on that board there?
Yep.
Yeah.
Just don't use
Do
the
you want to go first
Sharpies.
with what
Yeah.
popped into your head?
I mean, this is one thing that I remember we talked about it something in after we spoken about it with Jan, supervisor. Is that the obvious vision of the future for any company, organization, group of people engaged in things of sustainability is that someday they want this.
Great.
Because if you're trying to work, you guys were talking about this. Ideally, one day you wouldn't need to come before.
It's really funny that you mentioned that because my quote when we founded this was that if we're doing our job right, then it's not more boats, it's not more hours, it's more of the things that marinas do, right? And you know, we said eventually, if all the proper infrastructure was in place on our pump out program, right? and I think that CS as a whole is a different thing, but pump out wise, all the shore-based infrastructure was in place correctly and usefully, you wouldn't need us. Just like you have a place to tie your, a cleat to tie your line off to, there will be a place where your waste goes, where it's properly disposed of. And that's a reality in some other places like Florida. Some marinas are just like that. The Mike shipyard is closer, but if we were really
And even on a social macro level, the idea of any company that seeks to, or organization, whatever, group of people that seeks to have a more sustainable future is that at some point in that future, you will have managed to live in a society that doesn't require someone taking care of that society being sustainable.
Like at some point it will be so
At some point it
natural
will be-
and so ingrained
it will be
that it's no
self-sustaining.
longer.
You wouldn't have to have someone being a guardian and
It's
essentially
yeah.
babysitting everyone else
Wow.
to make sure that they're sustainable. They will be sustainable on their own. And that,
I think that's when you know that you've reached.
yeah, that
Or
should be
achieved
the
sustainability.
objective.
So I call that
Feasible.
self-sustainability, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's right.
And I wonder if we can keep these short for the moment without discussing them too much, just so we can get around before we lose connection with what came up. Did you have?
The only thing that really popped into my head was just different. It needs to be
Different.
very different. That was the only thing that immediately flew through my head and what can we see as doing.
So in a way, it seems like you're keying into an understanding that we have trouble even imagining how good it could be.
Exactly.
Yeah. How about you?
I thought it would be wonderful if everyone, not just people who were near the water, but everyone living in Connecticut or coastal Connecticut or Mystic, Stonington, Groton, whatever the geography is, had the same vision that CES has had.
So there would be
Commonality.
it would be common sense,
Right.
so to speak.
One of the things that we wrote in the blog post, and it's probably one of my slightly more insightful. Actually, I think that my wife had put it in when she was proofreading it. Nothing that I write can go out without at least 2 or 3 people proofreading it. But it was that we do hope that our mission is our mission, and our vision is something that we would love people to share with us, even partially. And if that is something that we can help facilitate organizations to help with, that's something that is very interesting for us. The thing that kind of came to my mind was, my wife is due any day, but was the next generation and what our area would look like when they were 60 years old. And if what we do now would have an effect on that in a positive way, if we really could stand to not take action on whatever we can do. And I think, for me, that's why we're here. That's why we're in this mezzanine sweating every afternoon. Is to think, we've done a good job of screwing some certain stuff up, and with my, seeing the future there every day, waking up, smiling, being so enthusiastic about the world and life. How can we, make it so that the future generations maybe don't have to deal with the same issues that we're dealing with, that maybe, like you said, it's more natural, and that, we look at things completely different, that their world is not, turn the key, start the car, go to work, do that sort of thing. That we look at it differently, whether it's gardens, whether it's heating, whether it's, but holistically, we worry about it now. Like, we worry about being sustainable. We worry about being environmentally friendly. We worry about separating our garbage. We worry about the fact that now people don't have to separate garbage, right? It's constantly in our forefront. And will it be in their forefront when they're, adults, and when they're beyond, when they're older, grown up, 70 years from now? And that's kind of the first thing that came to my mind.
So I put thinking and acting with the next generation in mind.
Yeah.
Seems reasonable. And I didn't, because I was talking, so I didn't really do this very well, but I'm going to put something sort of arbitrarily up here that came to mind, which is, for me personally, feeling much more connected to the natural rhythms of the world, to the natural world. And I think that maybe what we could do is use these sort of themes as a framework that we could then talk about each of those statements in that vision statement, maybe over on that paper or something, and start fleshing out what those statements might be.
You may want someone that can write a little.
Yeah. I mean, I write like a 6-year-old boy, but at least it might not go crooked.
I write like my 21-month-old.
Thank you for indulging me.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
So what was our first
I do apologize that this is not the most conducive place to meditation.
clean coastal waters?
Well, I don't like to overdo it, but I think it still has a role, you know.
You know,
like we're always thinking so much that sort of feeling, you know.
The 3 parts were.
Clean coastal water?
Yep, that's.
Or is there someone somewhere else who wants to?
Yeah,
I guess
that's
you
good.
could just write down the
Coastal
3
water,
headings.
Sustainable coastal life. Here, I actually have. If you want this, I've got other.
Oh.
My second page is
Clean water, clean coastal water, if you want.
Is something you wrote up?
Well, no, this is yours.
Oh.
Yeah. It's from your blog, actually, so it's more than just.
Yes! Someone read it!
Yeah, absolutely.
I read it, you were sitting here.
I know, I forced
So
you
should we
to.
start with one, or should we just get all 3 of them on the board and go from there?
Yeah, let's write them all 3 first.
Okay, clean coastal water.
Sustainable coastal life.
Sustainable coastal life and vibrant green coastal economy.
And so just so you know, if you wanted to go here, this will probably take the rest of the session, but I facilitated these kind of sessions before, and there's a model from the Japanese Kaizen practice of continuous improvement. And there's a brainstorming part to that exercise, which is where we can actually just each take an example of an object, like a bicycle, and you use the object to become the model that help flesh out your own personal idea. So you look at
almost an analogy, like
an analogy, right?
analogy
The
to that.
handlebars represent what?
Control.
Yeah, and the seat represents this, the frame of the bike, and it's a way to just.
Using like a human form design to fit higher level
And you can pick any object you want, and sometimes I had a list of different suggestions.
DSLR camera.
Yeah, you don't want to be
Three-hole punch.
too complicated. Yeah, a hole punch might be good.
3-hole punch.
Yeah, 3-hole punch. That would be a great one, actually.
I tried that
And
down.
so, if you ever want to do that, or either today or another time,
I think that this is really important, and I think that as a thought exercise we need to do more of it, because we do tend to get mired down in the nuts and bolts of it.
And we say it every day. We get so stuck in doing our day-to-day
We've done a
existence.
very good job of nutting and bolting it down to forms, checklists, which is necessary for operations. But
and we'll I think we'll go back there again too.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to
This is session
find something
one.
else
We're
to lock
getting-
onto that we can apply that expertise to. I
Yeah.
guess.
I guess for me, from that same blog post, clean coastal waters in the most simple sense means that we can interact with the water and not be afraid of getting sick. Things that are sustainable are things that are conducive to our life, and being able to swim in the water and not come out with conjunctivitis is kind of my basic level of clean coastal waters.
I want to flip that around and say that we can see the waters and experience the water as supporting lots of life and actually be healing. To see the water as healing as opposed to sickening.
Yeah, and it's
Talk about a shift, right?
Instead of people fearing going in the water, that it's something where people again, why do people not go on beaches? Because they're afraid. They're afraid maybe not of the pollution so much, but they're afraid of what they don't know in there. And other cultures aren't like that.
now we're afraid of the sun.
Sure, definitely.
So clean coastal water, I think, I mean, life, it supports like lots and lots of.
I think it's important that however much care about humans in terms of sustainability, you have to care about everyone else. Fishing, you have to care about plankton. You have to care about birds that are living off the coast. You have to care about every form of life that people back to show that they get the fresh air. Just as that they can live where they want to, where they always live, how they get to live, how they want to live, how you can frame that.
So the other thing about clean coastal, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say that's like,
For me, it's justice.
it's like interspecies in addition to intergenerational, so.
No, but really, like, even at a, from a married down to Michael level, I don't think we can have, we can, but I don't think it's ideal to have people working on boats who don't respect the fish that they're working. At a natural operations level, if you're working on cleaning the water, it has to be for more than just,
But I think
that makes sense.
yeah,
Which they probably
and then I
is,
think
but-
the story of this week, you have 20-some people working. You always have a story of the week. The story of this week was, well, Keith was talking to the Bridgeport operators. Thank you, Victor. My dad drew those out. Oh, sweet. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Yeah. One of the people he was talking to was smoking a cigarette, and as he was telling them how they need to do better and how Coastal Environmental Services were better than this, he flicks the cigarette butt. Before that, we had never really had to deal with smoking on the boat before as a rule, and that's the problem, is it becomes a rule, and it's not a culture.
But I think clean coastal waters and sustainable coastal life and a vibrant green coastal economy are not things, right? It's culture. I think it's a cultural change that we have to go through, and that we need to, start it at a level, but continue it on multiple levels, because the cultural change is going to change how we interact with the water.
One of the things you're alluding to is the idea that principles are expanding. They sort of support imagination into something better around our values, whereas rules are constraining. They're meant to just keep us from being bad.
We were trying to move someone towards a certain thought process yesterday from pump out boats. We should be selling from the pump out boats to gain money and support for our organization. Tank cleaning stuff or whatever, the blue stuff they put in the holding tanks. And we are trying, both of us, we're trying to move this individual's thought from, we're not about pump outs. We do pump outs for clean water. We're about clean water, and that people will support our organization and flock to our organization and become one with us because of our view of what clean water, that first clean coastal waters should be. And I was moving it to the point of, saying, what is a yacht club? It's like a group of people that have like-minded interests in sailing. I said, well, what if we had like a clean coastal water yacht club? And what if it was looked at with the same prestige and the badge,
like a green marina.
Like a green marina, but something that's even more all-encompassing. That you have a certain green marinas and this Clean Marina Act thing that Connecticut did. It's a shame that it's kind of gone the way that it did, because it's essentially dead now. But it's that same sort of idea that you're part of not a thing like a pump out, but a movement like this is what we want. And I think that was we saw it with just that perception, just fighting. Excuse me, I'm gonna get some water. Anyone like anything else? Water? Anyone?
I think the green coastal economy is kind of the dominant theme, or vibrant green coastal economy, because to have clean coastal water, we know that 80% of what's in the water is generated from water. So that alone says that if you don't have people mindful living just up, through the watershed, basically, your water's going to be spoiled. So land-based green economies are vital to have clean coastal waters. They don't get polluted.
So I want to argue against that respectfully, just to not put economy higher than the clean water itself. Because in a way, in my mind, that goes to the how, right, as opposed to the what. And what ought to be more important is the ideal of the whatever clean coastal water means. And you're right, the reason it's not is because of the human activity on the shores. One other I wanted to add, though, while we're fleshing out clean coastal water, is it also, in order to be clean, it needs to be able to deal with what's happening in the global trends of climate change and acidification,
Yes.
and loss of large fish. So, and this is what are you familiar with Thomas Berry? And one of the things that Thomas Berry said, he was a theologian, an ecologian is what his nickname was. He came from a theological background, but he did a lot of work in this realm. And he said, our challenge today is to go from being the human species to go from being a destructive force on the planet to a benign or mutually enhancing presence. And the idea of being mutually enhancing, and if we could be mutually enhancing with the coastal waters to help the waters themselves deal with the acidification and the climate stresses and the loss of big fish. So if we nurtured lots of food in the coastal waters, it would attract big fish. And even if the rest of the oceans are dying, if we had a place where we could show that the water could be vibrant and alive, that would be huge.
So I tweeted in 2 days in succession, it's so fun, that this is just how the world works. First day was how offshore wind farms have become a haven for seals because of the food source. And the seal populations are booming there, and then the vibrancy in the ecosystems there is beneficial because of these offshore wind farms. And literally the next day in the local paper, and this was a UK paper, maybe the Register UK? I'm not sure. Anyway, I figured you guys would know.
The Guardian.
It might have been. I don't know who it was. I think I retweeted it though, so it's definitely on Twitter from Pump Out. But a local paper then said that fishermen, because of the booming seal population in our coastal areas here, proposed that they start a seal hunt. And it's just like, you've got the aquarium that's rehabilitating the seals. You've got the fishermen that are trying. The fishermen will never be. A fisherman will never be happy. Just like a sailor will never. You ask a sailor how he will never. If they're not complaining about the food, there's something wrong. The same sort of thing. A fisherman will never be happy. Kill the seals. Kill the blackfish. Kill just kill everything because they're eating what they fish for, and it just seems so backwards. Like, this is great that gray seals or harbor seals, I forget which one it was, are coming back into the area. And in the winter, the middle of the winter, I'll never forget, it was a bad winter. It was a cold winter. We were probably one of the only boats in the water, pumping boats out, and we would go out in twos. And I remember how pristine everything was without that human presence. How the seabirds came right in. How you'd see every time you take the boat out, you'd see seals in the river, right? Just swimming up and down, coming right up to the boat, looking, seeing what's going on.
Which river?
Mystic River and the Thames River, everywhere. There was so much wildlife that you could not go out, and you could not go out without seeing it, and not experiencing how different it was when you take that step back and
eliminate that.
And yeah, exactly. And now it is what it is, and that's the condition that we're hoping to that condition of this is what we live in now. More boats want to come, so let's build more docks. More boats want to come, let's dredge the river so that bigger boats can come in and more boats can come in. The answer is more pump out boats, more this, more that, man. And there's an end state to it.
But in very simple terms, it seems like our ideal includes that wildlife, but the ability of the human presence to also be in there too. And I don't know if this is possible, but this is an ideal, that the two can coexist. To me, that would be the ideal that I would put in my mind. Go to work. And anything less isn't enough.
The other thing that comes to my mind is, and I've had the benefit of seeing firsthand in Kenya, was human beings' desire to just pick the earth clean. And here we understand well, decades in advance of Kenya on how we need to control and sustain things. So as all these problems that we talk about that we have here are 1,000-fold in Kenya. And there's a beautiful reef that is developed to protect the beaches that are there. And every day there's hundreds of fishermen in little dugout canoes that go out there and just will pick anything off of it. And coming from them, they're like, well, the fish aren't there like they used to be. It's like, well,
Yeah.
no kidding. There was maybe 2 people on the beach 40 years ago. Now there's 200. And as that reef dies, which it is, and there's very good studies from various organizations that talk about it, and I dealt with it. So is going to die that area, because that reef that protects the beach is not going to be there anymore. And it's the same sort of thing here, but we're ahead of it. We realize that, but it's a different problem. Are we still in clean coastal waters?
Anything else on
Sorry,
clean
I had to go off.
coastal waters? Maybe you want to jump to the coastal economy, or you want to go to the coastal life? Because we had some.
We had an order when we talked about this months ago, because I said, we got to come up with a vision statement, right? We have a mission. Got to do the vision. So I sat there and we talked about it, and they are in order, because
They are.
that sustainable coastal life is reaching not just pump out boats and boaters, and it's the community. It's looking at it and saying, we're going to do rain collection barrels. We're going to do little things. And everyone talks about those little things, right? And everyone, how many people here shower every day? I don't. I've taken that out as my personal thing. It's gross, right? Work out every day, but I don't shower every day.
I don't shower every day.
I've been 1.5 to 2. That's been my thing. And shower is well under 5 minutes. That's my goal. My wife is still working on it.
Yeah, you don't need to shower very long.
Right? Yeah, you don't. But those little things that add up, because it's not just water, it's sewer water then, and water in garden. It's the same sort of thing. We were talking about it yesterday with my 500-gallon tank that I rented. But it's being able to put a value on the sustainable coastal life that it's not, take Fisher's Island. If Fisher's Island does not become what the mansion people want it to become, the Fisher's Island maintains what Fisher's Island is. The same thing with anyone. If they can be sustainable at the small things, then it leads to the mindset of being able to, if everyone could, take a shower every 2 days, then they're like, well, we're already not showering every other day. Gross, right? But it doesn't seem like such a big stretch to say, let's get in the car and ride somewhere together. And then as those cars fill up, it's not such a stretch to say, why don't we get a van or a bus or, heaven forbid, a trolley, or like my brother, who can give me a ride to the to New London to take the train. Harrison, you can walk to the sea bus. Oh, I don't want to ride the sea bus. How crazy then is it to ride that sea bus? And I think that a sustainable coastal life is for me that mindset of, if we can start doing the little things, and if we can maybe not glamorize it, but just not, make it a negative thing. Make it so that, your neighbors, my neighbor told me she hates looking at the rain collection thing. Right? I'm like, put up a privacy fence. What do you want me to do? You want to pay a water bill? No. Put up a privacy fence. But that's kind of my mindset there.
My mindset here goes towards, like the reason I moved, part of the reason I moved back to Connecticut was to be with my family. But I love living on the ocean. I love living in this sort of community. And for me, the only way that could be sustainable is that I'm happy here. And I wanted to go where I was going to be happy. And the happiness takes precedence over a lot of other things in my life personally. I know it doesn't for a lot of other people. We sacrifice happiness, but I see happiness as a general.
Happiness with a capital H as opposed to a little h.
Yeah.
Which means it's really hard to be happy that all this destruction is taking place just outside of your vision. Because you're not looking, but yet if you're actually engaged with it,
well, you fall out of the cycle, that consumption cycle. When you get the big H happiness, you tend to move further away from that consumption cycle. You need fewer things. You need less of the things that you thought you always needed. It's my friend Sean, who was gung ho to join and probably watch this after, is living in New York, getting a job to make money, so he can live in New York, to eventually get out of New York. It's like, you don't need money to get out of New York. Just like my brother this morning. You need money to change things. You got to clean up the community, to make the community nice, to make Mystic a place that's beautiful like Nantucket or like whatever. It's like, you need people with money. It's like, well, yeah, no kidding, but you need leadership. And that big H isn't going to come through perpetuating the system that got us here. It's going to come through reevaluating your values.
Yeah, I was going to say values.
Yeah.
Happiness, values would be right hand in hand.
What's really important, right? Clean water, clean air, food, right? Community.
And not just from a necessity standpoint, but from a standpoint of, I think values leads, or those are sort of connected for me.
I hate to quote kind of cliche terms, but probably one of my favorite artists is activist, singer-songwriter Ted Leo. Anyone heard of him? Great guy. I've met him, and he's a really great guy. But one of his lyrics is, have you forgotten what it's like to eat what's rotten? And I think that then keeps going along with, if you put happiness, values, and consumption, right? It kind of goes along with consumption, that we have forgotten, as a community, as a people, what it is like to have to eat something that's not perfect. That we want everything to be perfect. We want everything to be, your steak has to be red, so they add chemicals to keep it red longer. And your tomatoes need to be unbruised. And your everything that goes into the opposite of sustainability is, I don't even know how to kind of articulate it, but as a
it's not a holistic. It's a repressive. It's trying to have the best without recognizing that there's wholeness that includes the bruise on the tomato.
And we've forgotten that part of life, and it's not it's not just physically food and fruit, but part of life is eating what's rotten, and that utopian society, or that that thing that we can't even imagine, is going to involve the downsides of it, because everything everything is not always cheap. You're going to be hot. If you go to Africa, you sleep in a tent, you're going to be hot, right? We don't need to have the air conditioning blasting, because you know what? If you're hot long enough, you're not hot anymore, right? Same thing with being cold. It's like you acclimate to being cold. You don't have to put the heat up at 75 degrees so that you can walk around in your shorts and t-shirt. We forget those things, that we're much more robust. As we forget it, we become more fragile, and it only perpetuates the same cycle.
Yeah, I think at a certain level, a certain level of say, my head works with your favorite word, which is entitlement. I think people are way too entitled to too much for the wrong reasons. And what you were talking about at the very beginning of this, we went back to having a culture of responsibility in a certain sense. Having a culture where no one needs to remind you that you are responsible for whatever. And having a culture for taking choices not based just on me, but based on a whole set of relationships, based on also on evaluating, not mechanically, but at a much more instinctive level, understanding that whatever you do has a consequence. That whatever consequence.
Becoming adults as a species, recognizing our role and our responsibility as part of a larger.
It's really strange is that we instinctively did that up until a certain level of history. We could go back however long we wanted, but
When we were woodland creatures.
I mean, we're in America. Like, American Indians had a very, very strong ties to nature. They were a much more responsible society than we are right now.
That has to be, well, even then, it was a learned.
Yes, correct. But it's a culture. That's what I'm saying. By culture.
Yeah,
It's
but we
something-
don't pay no
we have
attention to
different
that.
cultures.
There's nothing in our academic upbringing that has any
Or
resemblance.
even in our day-to-day. Again, everyone is entitled to everything for the wrong reasons. Mostly because they haven't done anything to deserve half the things that they have. But you're used to, since you're a kid, having your meat dead. Just because it's always like that. So why?
You go around here, you turn 16, you expect a car. It doesn't matter what kind of car you expect.
And,
Our
you know,
expectations of what's
we're talking here, but this is a much wider phenomenon.
the norm.
I want to add to this list, just those things that I said before, and then with the caveat that they're locally sourced, locally provided. So, food, clean air, clean water, shelter, and community, and all of it's locally based. To me, that describes an aspect of a sustainable coastal life.
I mean, in a certain, and I've been thinking about this quite a lot. I've been contemplating community about this. I think most of the problem with this particular part, well, I mean, overarching problem is that you just don't care. It's just not caring. You go to a supermarket because you don't have some concern of A, going to places and B, asking questions. You assume that whatever is going to be in the supermarket is it's all safe, it's all
Right.
blah blah blah. Someone else takes care of the thing.
Well, it's,
Well, it's fear too. Like we've learned to be afraid of chicken.
But I think
We've learned to be afraid of steak. We've learned to be afraid of the water. We're afraid of all these things because we don't know the butcher, because we don't know the.
Yeah, that's true. I think though a good deal of what drives it all is convenience.
Yes.
Consumption is great when it's convenient. When it gets difficult, then you're not putting in the time you need to.
That's where I was going to, like, the whole having to think thing.
Yeah.
It's very inconvenient for people nowadays
Yeah.
to have to think. It's very inconvenient for them to have to make the effort of asking, hey, where does your meat come from?
I think you hit on it earlier when you said you're kind of irresponsible in entitlement society, and those two things work at extreme opposites of where we want to go. And but we don't learn what it means to be responsible, and we don't understand what it means to be entitled because it's always been there for so long, at least for many Westerners.
So we're immersed in it.
We're immersed in it. We can't see, it's our context.
It's always been like that, and everyone around you is like that.
Right, it's the lens that we see
Right.
the world through.
Right.
It's our culture.
The middle one here, sustainable coastal life, I think that needs a little bit more clarity, because when I look at it, I say, well, are we talking about coastal life, all species, or are we talking about, and probably so, but our conversation has been almost exclusively on individuals'
I think when
approach to
when
coastal
I
living.
when I scratched this
Coastal
down,
living.
it was coastal life as in lifestyle, as in human
Yes.
lifestyle.
Yeah.
But I think
And
that
that's fine, too.
yeah, I mean I
that's
think that was what we scratched it down as, but that doesn't mean that it's right. You know,
One of my first questions was, are we augmenting the current vision or developing ideas? Are we adding our own perspectives to what the vision could be?
Yeah.
Or are we just trying to figure out what you meant?
yeah, well, both.
And both, that's exactly it.
Both. I think that I
See, I think when
been here and thinking about it a long time, but that doesn't mean that any of it's right.
Right.
No, I think it's all right.
good,
It's just,
though.
we're
It's all
just
good, yeah.
now we're fleshing out.
Yeah.
when you say sustainable coastal life, if I'm a developer, I think, well, what does the house look like? What do the grounds look like?
Right.
If I'm a retiree, I say, well, what does it mean to eat in my garden rather than shop at the big lot? Or if I'm a fisherman, I'm thinking, oh, I want healthy fish and shellfish to harvest.
Well, I want to give back.
Yes.
And I think that that hits on the next topic of economy, because
Yes.
it parlays sustainable coastal life and a green coastal economy are two things that kind of go hand in hand. And
Yes.
for such a long time, like that fisherman that says, I want healthy fish, has always been taken without the idea of giving back. And one thing that I'm relatively passionate about in our budgeting shellfish program is that idea of giving back. Like, we're going to grow shellfish for education, but also grow shellfish to seed shellfish beds so that people can experience shellfishing, recreationally, to seed shellfish beds so that there are more shellfish there that then grow off of each other, that becomes a habitat for other animals and cleans water. Like New York City's billion oyster project. That sort of thing where you have sustainable coastal life feeds into that green coastal economy. Because if you are a developer and you say, I'm going to develop a beautiful house that fits into the landscape, right? That's beautiful. But I'm also going to take into consideration runoff. I'm going to take into consideration how to build up, the ground so that they're easy to maintain, so that they don't need pesticides, they don't need herbicides and fertilizers, so that.
But I think the danger of going into the technology realm is that what could happen if tomorrow we develop an enzyme that you drop in a thimble amount into the river, and it goes after all the algae, all the pollution, and eliminates everything and creates crystal clear, beautiful water, healthy water. What does that do to our responsibility? It takes it off the shelf entirely. We can be as abusive as we want.
It's almost like everyone asking, why don't we have a feature to add weekly pump outs automatically? And I said, because then you wouldn't have to think about it. And to an extent, we've made it so easy, I want them to, every week, at least think about it. And it's the same sort of thing. Because if you had all the solutions, then no one would ever have to, even have it in their consciousness.
I think there's a certain component of responsibility for me, the way I understand responsibility, that does not necessarily be attached just to the results.
Yes, I think that's
you shouldn't necessarily be responsible simply because you're doing hurts. You should be responsible as a person, regardless of the outcome. Is that
right? Yeah, because if I fertilize my lawn and this thimble of agent now can be dropped into the water and eliminate every damaging consequence that I'm doing, then where's my responsibility? I can continue to pollute, and technology takes it away.
And for me, the thing is, whatever technological solution you find, is only going to erase more tangible effects. So it's going to change the pH of the land. It's going to change the acidity of water. It's going to do tangible, scientifically measured environmental effects. But for me, sustainability goes a lot further than just tangible environmental things. I think there's a certain sustainability involved with people. I think people have lost touch with people in society.
Okay, so do these three things, do clean coastal water, sustainable coastal life, and vibrant green coastal economy, automatically infer human responsibility in all of that?
But I don't know if that's the case for everyone. For me, responsibility is at the core. And again, not just that coming in as a culture. I think we need to be a lot more conscious of what we're doing, what we want to, which I think a lot of people are not. And the examples of people taking jobs. I know my two best friends are taking finance jobs and they know that essentially quitting in 2 years. I'm like, well, that's an awesome life map right there. Taking a job you don't want to do in a place you don't want to be, like you're quitting in 2 years. Totally made sense.
So I just want to interject my response to that from the ideal perspective is that my ideal includes humans in that picture, so therefore it has to imply a sense of really a felt and acted upon interconnectedness, which is another way of saying it.
Yeah.
Are we sort of done here, or do we want to keep fleshing what this means out?
One thing I wanted to see if I could add that came up too What's your first name again? I'm sorry.
Richard.
Richard. What Richard was talking is that my ideal includes, I think, this possibility that we all see ourselves first and foremost in terms of role or whatever we identify with being human, and what that means in terms of being a part of this web, as opposed to being a developer.
Yeah.
As opposed to being a fisherman.
Right.
Because then our perspective
Human
becomes
first.
yeah, and that also goes to the responsibility question too.
Right. But being human has many facets, and being human is about consuming and about being a predator as well. I mean, those are human characteristics. So we can't just assume that human is good.
Well, no, but I wouldn't suggest to take them in isolation either. That there's a wholeness, and that if you're looking at the integral view, that predation is part of the bigger picture, but so is cooperation and nurturing and then
Balance.
I
think Native Americans and even tribes in the Amazon that we're not contacting have a certain, they're predators, but they also have a certain degree of balance, so they understand that if all of the wild boars are gone, there's no more wild boars. If all of the berry trees get picked clean, there's no cross-pollination.
And it is split.
If all your male zucchini flowers get deep fried,
Yeah.
there are no zucchinis.
Nice.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
There's also the possibility of composting, human waste someday as another approach that completes the cycle. So even that, we could talk about the idea of putting it in a pipe and flushing it with lots of clean water, when actually there's like value in it that's being just thrown away.
I know more about that than I probably.
I know quite a bit about it too, but I bet we have some different perspectives.
I used to work for the DEP in New York City on a sludge tanker.
Whoa.
So we would take all the sludge from one plant that didn't have dewatering, the plants that did have dewatering, and then dewatered sludge would become fertilizer at another plant. And this is all happening in New York City. And the fertilizer would get trained down to Florida, either to fertilize like the orange
Groves.
Yeah.
But that's a very large scale sort of centralized sort of approach
Yeah.
to the problem
It
that
is.
can also be done very locally and decentralized.
Which is funny that they come up with the solutions when there's 10 million people there.
Yeah.
But when there's 18,000 people in like a Stonington, it's not even on their radar
It's less
to do
than-
anything that's that aggressive.
Well, but I think you have to uncover sort of the ideas about why, like, putting in sewer lines is actually favored because there's this, it creates economic development. So now that street there that never had sewers, now it does. Now we can have businesses on there, and we can have tax base.
Absolutely.
So there's these subtle pressures that you need to be also shining a light on, saying, is that really serving us?
So as we extend down the coast, and we extend from the Mystic perspective, and Groton, which is actually more of a model on that, on the fact that we have sewers and treatment, blah, 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 if that is what we're saying is good, compared to septic systems which are out of code,
Right.
which is the alternative at this point.
Right.
And not saying that, the newer type technologies are even on the table at this point. Places like Clinton and Westbrook and Old Saybrook don't even have any sewer.
Yeah.
And they have lots of out of spec
Yeah.
septic system right on the water.
Yeah. And in Mason's Island.
From an ideal perspective, though, so what's the ideal that we might strive for? Because I like this unnecessary in the future idea.
Yeah.
Like, how does that feed into an ideal that, again, I don't know how it comes about, but if we don't even know what it is, then we're not really even shooting for in the right direction necessarily.
The ultimate answer is fewer people, said before.
Yeah. What is sustainable in terms
Exactly.
of human population?
Exactly, because in order to get the bakers and the businesses and the support system that is required for Western culture, you need to have a wastewater treatment like we have now. And if you said each individual building was responsible for, another type of maybe organic treatment method, you wouldn't be able to get that density in, you wouldn't be able to make as much bread, or you wouldn't be able to seat as many people for dinner, blah, blah, blah.
It does come down to the fact that to be sustainable on a scale of the density that we have, is very difficult because it's very infrastructure dependent, and there are your development plans that don't necessarily build infrastructure correctly. That there are things at waste plants that could be done better. There are things that could be done more naturally. One of the things that they have done, which is a good thing, is gotten rid of constant chlorination in a lot of the waste plants in favor of UV sterilization, which is, in my opinion, a major plus. Because
But that's probably a fraction of the number of plants that are still used.
Yeah, and a lot of times they don't have tertiary treatment of phosphates and nitrates. Like Mystic plant, it dumps right out there by the railroad bridge. I don't believe it has it. And those are all things that feed in today. Those are, we step away from the ideal and we move to the nuts and bolts. But the realities that we live in are such that it's difficult.
I don't know that we have to have all the answers, but I think the willingness to speak, like even the forbidden population question, at least shine some light on it. And if your vision of a sustainable future includes, acknowledging that infinite population growth is impossible, then at least that is getting spoken into the conversation, as opposed to, say, a religious view that says we must just procreate, or an economic view that says we need to grow infinitely.
Right, but those two things, population growth and productivity increases, are what makes an economy grow. Those are the only two things. And that's the problem, I think, with a consumption society dependent on growth for its future, in which population is growing, as ours continues to do. Productivity enhancements are continuing repeatedly now.
So are you saying that really the root cause that needs to be looked at is the need for economic growth in the first place?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's unsustainable. It really is unsustainable. It's an unsustainable model.
I mean, you look at just stocks in general.
When you've got the presidents for the last 40 years always saying they have a growth agenda.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
it's untenable, really. But we don't understand anything but growth is good. We don't really understand.
Well, but we could.
We could, absolutely. We could.
And I think the fact that if you truly want to address this word sustainability in a meeting like this, that I'm totally with you on that's why I'm here, is to make sure that idea is at least spoken into this room.
Yeah.
So the possibility of it showing up in some form in
Yes.
our understanding of what sustainability
But that's a
is.
very contrarian position to take in today's world, where people are suffering because they don't have a job, or they're underemployed, or they're not making enough money, or the whole household isn't doing well. And you're saying, well, we can't have a consumption society in which growth is the most important thing we think of. Growth first, then everything follows it. Happiness follows growth is what our model is.
Right.
And it's unfortunately not the case anymore, and it may not have been the case the last several years, but we haven't quite caught up with that yet.
You just segued, and you just stimulated for me the idea that something we could write here is, because we go by this thing called gross domestic product, but a country like Bhutan has a gross happiness. So one aspect of our green vibrant economy might be that we just have a better metric to measure it by, that it's not based on just gross growth, but actually on how well the needs of the people in that locality are being met, and how happy they are, just like Libby said.
And I think a lot of, most of the considerations that go through my head speak about sustainable economy. Why do you work? Because you get out of your job. Because you want to get out of your job. Obviously, you get money. And if you do go for the money, it's actually why is it that you're targeting? What do you want to do? Because obviously, everyone needs money to pay the bills. Everyone needs money, but the moment you have kids, you have money. And that's understandable.
But it's not a virtuous cycle.
Yes, but so many people go for the money as a main objective. It can never be. But I mean, we're trained. This is the culture we live in. The culture we live in, we
Can I ask you to explain what that means? What is not a virtuous cycle?
Well, in other words, you want more money so that you can consume more things, which will make you happier. That's the virtual cycle or the virtual circle that the model is built on. That's why we have got into the credit society. You can buy anything you want on credit as long as you have good credit. And until we hit the credit crunch, everybody's happy because everybody can buy into, oh, I'm going to have an ice cream tonight. I'm going to, go to the movies. I'm going to do this. And I can have that with a job, with increasing money. That's what it is.
And I would question that actually if we really are happy, even though you said even when it's working, that ultimately, like what I discovered was that didn't lead to happiness, even when it did work.
Yeah, there's a lot of research in that area that says for the vast majority of people, continuous income higher and higher and higher doesn't lead to greater happiness. But there is a minimum at which you kind of reach that point, the apex, and then you're saying, anything more I don't really need. But getting to that, whatever that scale is pretty important.
That minimum actually represents, though, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be tied to money so much as your basic needs are met, which goes back to the things that I asked you listed on that last page, that I think those are correlated.
Yeah.
And so we could actually start to separate the idea that you need a certain amount of money into and identify that actually you need certain things to have a healthy.
A lot of people are looking for a certain amount of money which they think buys them a certain amount of security.
That's the certain
And security, the feeling of wellness.
So
that's a good point.
we went in, I had the unique, I'm going back to Kenya a year and a half ago. We had a unique opportunity to have the United States Navy say, go forth and do great things, right? We want you to do everything that you can think of that does not involve killing people in a community, right? So we were in charge of all civil aspects of any sort of military action, right? All the feel-good stuff, all the well digging, all the assessments, everything that was not essentially linked to bang bang, warheads on foreheads, which was kind of cool. Like, even supply ships in the Navy are designed to be part of a machine and kill them, right? We were the one part where the military was like, we want to learn a little bit more about this, we want to see what's going on, we want to put some people that have some insight on the ground to kind of let us know what the real root problems are. So we said, how are we going to assess a village, right? Just kind of like how we're going to assess our community here, how we're going to assess a coastal. We said, why should we reinvent the wheel when we can go to like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs and say, let's look at a village in that perspective. And you ask people, and you're like, are you happy? These are standard civil affairs questions. Are you happy? Yeah. What's your biggest problem? Right? Your one biggest problem. Okay. What would be one thing that you would change? Right? These are very boilerplate answers. Who solves your problems? Right? And then what we do is we get a feel for what the issues were in a community, right? This would be a village, let's say, that was what they call pastoral, that they have the goats and they burn the dung and the kids eat the fruit that fall from the tree and the men sleep all day and the women are hacking down the trees to get fire. It's like a very, very simple community, but they're generally happy. Generally, like that issue. We'd love to have more vaccinations for our babies. Okay. We talk about vaccinations 7 times. We would love to have security, a little bit more security. Not security like we're talking like nest egg security. Security like we don't want bad guys with AK-47s coming and falling down our families, right? These are all relative, but people are generally happy. People are, healthy to a degree that you could in a third world country like that. People did die and people had sicknesses and people tend to have maybe goiters or something like that. But we would always look at it from that kind of, what needs are being met and where are people. We found that the people that tended to be happier were on that lower scale, right? As you move towards the self-determination is the top. It seemed like, just the communities were not as, you go and you move into like a Mombasa or Nairobi, which are the cities, it's cultural centers, and people were, generally less happy. They generally had more problems, right? Their security was definitely worse. You know, if you're reading the newspaper or anything about coastal Kenya, you'll know that it's not a very secure place right now. And it's like you'd almost wish that you were, you know, in that pastoral community that had a goat if you're hungry. Goat goes on the cutting board. So it showcases, you know, what we're talking about is that once you get into that consumption cycle, you think you're above it. You know, you think you're above stacking rocks to make a wall, or digging out a hole in your backyard to plant a tree or something. You know, you get beyond what it is to be, you know, I don't even know what I'm looking to say, but as you move up and you become, you know, this ideal on the hierarchy of needs, you lose what, you know, we consider the big H in happiness. You know, just like, well, we got to go and eat oysters, you know, with the guys after we, you know, finish at the law office in New York City, right? So you gain weight, right? And then you got to go to Equinox and spend, you know, $1,000 a month to be part of the health club and work off that, you know, thing. And then you got your wife yelling at you, and you got to pay your, you know, your thing in New York City, blah blah blah. I mean, you did the New York City thing. I've done the New York City thing, and it doesn't end, and it doesn't make you happy, and it doesn't make you live longer, and it's that perspective where you see the guy that's happy as a clam in high tide, pushing a cart full of water down the street for 50 miles a day to make $2. What are your problems? I don't have any problems. You know, guy's chiseled, huge. Like everyone, I'd be like, I would kill someone for that body. The guy's just like ripped. Like, you know what I'm talking about, right? This guy's like six packs you wouldn't believe. And it's like, I don't have any problems. Just pushing this cart of water 40 more miles this way. Let me get going, you know? If I don't get this water, they're not going to get my $2, you know? Then I'll have a problem, right? But it was a very simple life. And they were, you know, they were, you know, can you speak to the same?
Yeah, I lived in Kenya for 3 months, 2 summers ago. And the happiest people I met were the people who had 1 chicken left. And I would come for dinner. I was working with a little nonprofit, and they would kill their last chicken to feed it to me for dinner. And they were the happiest people in that community that night that I was spent with them, enjoying their meal, sharing, literally the nothing that they had. Even just my presence. I'm a Zungu, I'm a white person coming in, and that's different. But the level of happiness and the kids who want to climb on you and they have no cares, and school, like, yeah, we want to send our kids to a good school, but look how happy they are playing with their little neighborhood friends. And they grow up and they become the guy who pushes the water cart, and you get in his way and he's like, you're just blocking my traffic, I gotta keep going. And you're like, all right, I'll just run next to you for a minute and have a chat with you.
Did you ever see the film, I think it's called Leaving Ladakh, documentary about the westernization of part of Tibet?
Yeah.
You were talking about the cities, and you could see the effects of it was about westernization and how that was very much, how it destroyed the fabric of the community, which is where this security and this happiness really came from. And then people became unhappy. Yet money came in and they could buy things and motor scooters and cigarettes.
And I worked with coastal communities in Kenya, mainly with families and women who were not traditionally the leaders of their family, but their husbands were all fishermen who could no longer catch fish because the young fish stocks were completely decimated, couldn't go out in their little kayaks to catch fish. I was working with the women who were like, all right, our husbands are idiots. They're going to keep fishing until the day they fall off the boat and die. That was just their life perspective.
We were the one teaching them.
They're like, what can we do? What can we do to do something differently?
Yeah.
We can't plant tomatoes, but, you know, what are these greenhouse things that you're talking about? I'm like, I can show you how to build a greenhouse at a local stuff, not a problem. And you got every kid in that village helping to build a greenhouse, and the men, you never even meet them. And I would come for church and stuff, and these women were doing all the heavy work. They were, it's just. But then I went to the cities, and people were not happy in the cities. You know, they all got their cars, and there's a woman who walks 25 miles a day to get to work, and it's just. I don't know where that comes into this, but.
I kind of want to redirect the conversation considering.
I know we have to go on that now.
I think the whole shows happiness being a lot better than GDP. That's an accepted line. That's debating that. There's been loads of those research. I've studied this. The whole Eastern paradox that's been around since 1970. You know Eastern paradox? Do you guys know the Eastern paradox? That's essentially a graph that measures GDP against subjective happiness, and it tails off. It tails off. If you get up to here, which is mostly Venezuela, or South American poor country level GDP, and from here on in GDP, the graph tails off, and here is the United States, Sweden, the UK, rich countries, same level, doesn't matter. GDP takes you only so far because money takes you so far. Now, my point, and what I think is relevant to you guys, is we're all in agreement that happiness is definitely a measure. Okay, what's happiness, and how do we get it? And yes, this is nuts and bolts, but it's relevant nuts and bolts because happiness is extremely subjective, and I think there's a traditional misconception. This is where the whole GDP comes from, that money equals happiness, which I think we'll find agreement here is not necessarily true, and it's not true in most cases, especially in the developed world. So what is it that makes you guys happy? What is it that makes you happy? Why do you work? What do you work? Why did you make this company? What is it, organization? Why?
I think that for me, happiness is knowing that change can occur, that one can take actions to affect the future, and that exactly empowerment, and that things don't always have to be the way they've always been. I think that's, you say, why did this start? It was because there was a 16-year-old kid that was sitting on a boat and said, this isn't right. The way this runs isn't right. And that was kind of when this all started, It was, nuts and bolts, and still is nuts and bolts to an extent, but, it started with, hey, let's fix up the boat town of Groton. Let's not, let's take a little pride in it. And it's the same thing over and over again. Same thing's happening now in Bridgeport. Let's, be proud of what we're doing here instead of making it part of a joke. So for me, happiness is being able to say that things don't have to be the way they are, that things can be better.
What touch you? What is it that makes you?
Oddly enough, I think it's in the Constitution. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those three things. If I have those three things, and I'm alive. So life, liberty. I feel like some of our liberties are changing for the worse, and the pursuit of happiness is up to individuals, and they can do so as they choose, given life and liberty. And I think the pursuit of happiness is different for a lot of different people, but you can define it for yourself. And I think that's the great liberty that we all enjoy. Now, to different degrees, of course, and that's why we get different levels of happiness.
I want to add under economy that trade is facilitated. And just to get my own 2 cents in about, this is sort of part of the same point, is that with money that's not destructive. So that we become aware of how the nature of the money we use plays a role, and that we've addressed that. The reason we have a green economy is because we've designed our money to not require constant infinite growth in order to function, and therefore we can live in more of a steady state. So, but yet we have this way of interacting, like interacting with each other, and with the rest of the living world too. So it's all facilitated in some way, but not with a vehicle that requires a destructive arc to it. I know that was a lot. I don't know how you sum it up.
I think two relevant things that come off to what you guys are saying. For me, one of them is freedom of opportunity. I think a lot of people in this world, even a lot of people in this town, definitely a lot of people in this country, don't have the means to do what they want. Might know what they want, but they don't have the means to do what they want. Be that because they have a lot of pressure to get money because the market is not
County, be that because they don't have the education to do what they do, be that because they have to move, they obviously don't have the money to pay to Miami, whatever the reason is, they don't have the means to do what they do. And the other one I think is generally not having a willingness to a culture of knowing what you want. I think a lot of people do have the means and don't have any idea what they want, and don't have any intention of thinking about what they want because yeah.
Here we have a very interesting demographic, and I talk about this with my brother in that when we talk about leadership at that local level, that all the people that probably should be the leaders don't want anything to do with it. All the leaders are not leading. So the other aspects come in, and the idea, the way that a town like Surgeon was designed was around that civil engagement of like it's your responsibility to be involved. And because we have seasonal people that come here, because the people that probably should be doing it are task saturated with other tasks, you don't have those people in these voluntary positions that run these boards that have the leadership capabilities to be able to drive it. They can have reports all day long, like you said, and they can be flat. I can write reports like you wouldn't believe. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's the art of execution.
I think that's absolutely right. The thing that struck me most about plan of conservation and development was that graph that I told you about with the seniors going like this and youngsters going like this. That struck me as the biggest issue. It wasn't anything but a graph. Never even noted in the rest of the report. And how do you create a vibrant economy? Any kind of vibrant economy, whether it's green or consumption-based,
and
without young people.
I had this argument with my brother, and he said, "What Stonington needs? More people like me, right? More people like me. More, he started his own business. He's doing LED lights. He's doing great." And I said, "Harrison, this place would be a mess if there were another 25 of you. Let's be serious. The bars, there'd be bar fights. There'd be people peeing all over the streets. 25. Think about it." He's like, "I've never peed on the street and missed it." I'm like, "You had to specify in Mystic. You had to specify in Mystic."
I knew that as soon as you said that.
Right? So I said we have a lot, and I think that it goes without saying that you need a cross section.
Yeah.
Right? But what I think we need to tap into the experience and the knowledge that older population has. We need to tap into that leadership because that's where it comes from. I believe that, knowledge is one thing, experience is another, but that kind of sage, village elder type mentality.
I suspect there's also something going on with dynamics. Now, I'm, as I said, retired, and I'm planning on living here full time, but in the last 12 years, I've been coming back and forth. So I'm a summer person while in New York the rest of the year. But as I get to know the town governance and the individuals running it and attend the meetings in Stonington, I realize that it's a bastion of the old town people who want to control the town and not open it up. Like the fact that they did not even consider that graph as the central issue in the whole plan. Seniors going off the roof and young people fleeing the town. What kind of town are you going to end up with? It's certainly going to be a skewed town population that is then totally driven by the needs of seniors. Where are young people going to work?
We were driving through Spain, and there were towns that were, built in the last 10, 15 years that were empty.
Yeah.
Really?
There was nobody there,
Wow.
aging population, all the young people took off to go find jobs in the big cities. It gives you the creeps. You're driving through these towns, and literally the entire population has died off, and nobody wants to live there anymore. And they're in the mountains, they're beautiful.
To go back to the essential question, I think CES is kind of the microcosm of the larger question.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do for the organization? But what do you do for the population at large in coastal Connecticut? And I think they're intimately interwoven. They have the same needs, really. But the towns are not expressing those needs in a vigorous fashion, whereas you are. You're clearly focused on that. The towns need to think about what it means to be a progressive and vibrant and green economy not conservation and development, you know? And that's what I think, going back to that initial thought, that there are a lot of fragmented groups here, all thinking roughly along the same lines. And I think if you could put them all in the same room and come to some of the things that you've mentioned here, like clean coastal water, sustainable coastal life, vibrant coastal economy, everyone would say, aha, we're for that. How do we propose to get there? And I think that's what's missing in the aggregate. The big population hasn't embraced those concepts at all.
So I wanted to, because we're running out of time, and also sort of add my 2 cents about bringing this to a place of completion for today. From my perspective, I think the exercise now is to take what we did and use it to just flesh out the vision, the articulation of a vision, of the ideal that we're striving for. We've got elements. I took a picture of that. I'll type that up and I can send it out. And then can somebody take those sheets of paper? Or
I'll
I can.
take them up, yes.
Okay, you. In my mind, this is not necessarily the way it has to go, but the process that came to me would be, once we have an ideal, some sort of description of this ideal, then we might also have a session that says, okay, what are the things impeding us from this idea? So, and use that as the platform to then, so then a third step would be to look at the impediments and say, okay, where can we have, provide value or an impact, through an operational.
So one of the things that I don't know if it's decent at, but I've spent a lot of time having people help talk to me about it, is operational planning in the Navy, and actually before your constraints and restraints, which is I think what you're talking about and what's keeping us from doing that, we need to look a little bit more holistically at capabilities and what are those capabilities that we have, and then from there we back out those constraints and restraints. Because if we have a clear definition of what our capabilities are towards these ends, I think that's, I guess taking a step even further back is, you said, what is our vision of, don't be afraid to have that vision that we want to attain. I think we need to step in and say, okay, let's hash out those things, right? Those things that are in the vision, and get sort of those objectives that we want, that end state, maybe an end state statement.
Yeah,
right.
That's what we need to take.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I think.
But I think you assumed I was talking organizationally, and I wasn't. I was talking more globally, what's impeding the vision from being in existence right now.
Yeah.
And then once you identify those,
so you're talking even before we get
right, and then you can identify your capabilities and match that against impediments and say we would be good at addressing this particular impediment.
And I think that's what we want to, as an organization, and I can speak to this to just the history of the organization, is that's where we want to be sitting, is we want to be that tool that can be used to attain those goals. We want to be the operational arm of an organization like Push. We want to be the operational arm of, an organization like NESS or something that wants to do things. We want to be the ones that help facilitate that. And I think that's been, if I were to say our vision is one thing, what we're bred in and the fabric that we're made of is in operation. And that's where we see, we want to, in doing things, bringing those people to the table is one of those things.
So I'm sensitive to not being in analysis paralysis, but I also have the sense of there's like 3 steps before we get to that.
Yep.
And they don't have to be, like, for me, you just need to touch on them, like 2 more 2-hour sessions to build the base that then allows us to, and actually I think we're going to be the ones going to the Cushes and the other organizations saying, we have identified this opportunity that we know we could be good at, and it aligns with your mission, and we want to see if you're willing to.
Do we know some of those other organizations offhand? I feel like.
I think I could probably list a few of them, sure.
Okay, yeah.
But there are probably, varying sizes, varying budgets, and varying member size as well. Some of them are not members; they're just contributors, and some of them are members.
I think that that would be kind of the next step, to bring some more people in the fold and maybe find a better thing.
If they were like the organization that I ran, and I would kiss whoever came to me with an operational idea, because that's what we struggled with. It's like how to take a very broad idea like the Earth Charter and turn it into something, a specific initiative.
I'd recommend, I'm do this again myself, reread the Stonington plan, because one of the things it does do is the town reached out to all the local organizations, largely not-for-profit organizations.
Is that through the roundtable?
None of it was through the roundtable, but it was through the planning committee.
Okay.
And they asked all of them to submit what they thought were the compelling issues and the plan of attack they would propose to address those issues. And one of the big things that's new in the 2014 Stonington plan is the agricultural initiatives. You know, local produce, making farms available, and freeing up the land for farming, bringing it back.
East Adam did exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of process unfolding.
And I think there's a lot of firepower and organizing capabilities in those groups and the conservation groups and clean water groups that would all share a similar mindset.
So if we wanted to do another one of these sessions, what do we think would be a good?
Can we change this from us to what's impeding the vision? What's impeding this from being reality?
I think we need the kind of deliverables too, that, you know, if we're going to hash out what we've come from here and, you know, essentially make it into one, whatever, it's a document, a statement, a graph, I don't care what
So we're
it
going to
is.
start with the vision.
We need to get something written down
Well, we can do
that
that.
captures
We can
today.
do that
Yeah, we're going to
remotely
do that
too, right?
internally.
Yeah.
So that's going to be one of our deliverables.
So the next meeting to me would be a discussion of the impediments to keeping the vision that we've now gotten together.
I think it'll be kind of like maybe an adoption of the vision once.
Okay.
You know, because
So
I
we
think
need to
that
go
vision,
over it.
if it is
Yeah.
going to be truly shared, like we spoke about, it needs to be adopted by more than just coastal. You know, and I think that I'll have Kelly, who's one of our board members from the aquarium here. She needs to be here, and maybe Dana from another, you know, seaport, because they are big into the same sort of vision type ideas that we are.
That's interesting.
We probably want to get our ducks in a row, though.
They
too.
are though, you know, but they are, but they're not.
Yeah.
See, they're working, I think the seaport and the aquarium and all the casinos, etc., are all thwarting that vibrant coastal community, because what they're doing is they're creating a carbon footprint that is enormous. And
That is true.
That is the worst possible approach. Drive in, you know, and the catchment area for these organizations is 150 miles. Their plan is to get every family 150 miles to come through the aquarium and the seaport at least twice a year.
That's the numbers, yeah. But are we going to be able to
That's enough of that.
solve? When I say solve, are we going to be able to institute this
Lay
at,
down.
you know, a more large level if we don't
Well,
have
see,
that change?
well,
Those movers,
that-
those prime
but
movers.
that's a chain reaction there, because to support their objective for more tourism is to link right into further development. It's a
I think
one
you could
plus
look
one.
at it differently in that you could increase tourism through sustainable, when we talk about sustainable development, in that utilizing transportation better, you know, one of the things that I brought down was that sustainable Mystic idea, that leave your cars at the highway, come into Mystic via trolley, you know, and make it so that, you know, the roads in Mystic weren't, you know, clogged at noon and when the bridge goes up.
Yeah,
I feel that idealistically they want to be on the same page, and you're saying
Well, they
functionally they can't be
they
on the
can't
same
be on the same page. They would love to be philosophically on the
Yes.
same page. It makes
I think
sense.
they are,
Yeah.
but in reality,
In reality, they
know,
can't be.
Chris would be the first one to say that that's what they want.
Exactly.
But I think those are the tough questions that we can say that we're going to run on, you know, biodiesel all day long. We're going to be the model of organization.
The downtown merchants and more merchants to come are dependent on those two organizations to drive people into Mystic Village, downtown Mystic, Old Mystic Village, you name it, every place. And And the casinos are the same way. Bring more people across from Long Island into New London and taxi them up to the casinos. And then, on their way back, stop in Mystic and, you know.
I think that opens up, this is conversation, maybe, maybe this was, precursor conversation is what gives, if Mystic is something, like you said, like it's a brand.
Yeah.
And what gives us the right to say Mystic should be sampled by this subset of people? And I think that deep down, I would want more people to come to my Mystic and experience it my way, right? Which would be, like when I say you come into Mystic River, you're going to get a pump out because you're in our river, right? Come visit our river, but by all means, get a pump out, not dump and jump in the water. And you know what? Everyone is going to be watching because we want you to enjoy this, but you're going to enjoy it our way. And I think that if people experience that, and then we talk about that chain reaction of, if Mystic is like that, and Mystic holistically, because the aquarium and the seaport aren't going away, if people come to Mystic and they know that, maybe you can go to the point of, carbon exchange system, whatever it is, that you want to come to Mystic, we've got to balance it out. 5 people need to walk if you want to drive your car. That's kind of the community involvement that I would see, because if we operate in a vacuum and we have, sustainability in the sense that we're growing things and we're eating things and we're doing everything like we were talking about in a well-balanced society that balances wildlife and land and water and waste and humans, if we do it in a vacuum, it doesn't matter, because you'll still have a Las Vegas and you'll still have all the other problems in communities that are acting in completely different ways. And I fear that, if we say that Mystic is not a model of a sustainable tourist attraction, it will become like a Las Vegas or a Disney World or whatever that Six Flags or whatever it is. So I think maybe like you said, it's not something to bring them in on at this level, but I think at some point, being the prime movers like that, they need to come on board and they need to realize that they are a major part of the problem.
Yeah.
And I think that realization will then lead them to become a major part of the solution if they change the way they do business. If Chris, like he said, is focusing on, instead of getting 200,000 people through that gate, if they focus on getting 50,000 high-value people through that gate that are going to, maybe instead of 200,000 people at $20 a head, maybe those 50,000 people are worth $2,000 each to the organization, and they can be sustainable with a less carbon footprint. And that's something, that conversation that we've had, is he wants to increase the value of his visitor. Now, the development strategy for the aquarium is completely different and flawed to an extent that they hit numbers, they put numbers on a board that they were completely unable to attain with parking lot size, with ramp size in Mystic, with the traffic light situation. You look at traffic lights, wow.
Yeah.
What we could do with traffic lights to alleviate issues in Mystic is beyond my comprehension. But we are starting to make our own blockades for that. But can I do one final statement?
Yeah.
In that, the one thing that we did talk to Fran about, and that I do want to kind of leave as a lasting statement, would be to start putting some pressure on Stonington to get that voting hall as a community sustainability center. And I would be willing to, say that we're going to dedicate our rent to improving it, that we would try to make it a model, that we would make it open to the public.
You mean the voting booth, right?
The voting hall, yeah, the voting hall broad.
Well, yeah.
Have you heard anything on that?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
But there's another example of towns and intransigence around pollution. There is a drainage pipe that sucks everything out of that parking lot. It's a sand parking lot,
right?
And it runs right down into the river. So everything that goes through that parking lot, oil from cars, flash floods, everything.
Fuel tanks that flip over.
Fuel tanks that flip over, you name it. Whatever is in that parking lot goes right into the river. Town will never, ever touch that pipe because it's too intensive to take that up through 400 yards of drainage.
And that was one of the things that I told Ed. I was like, if we had that, we could at least start making moves to make it something. I mean, my point would be, and I don't know anything about it, but I know that we have a lot of friends in Coastal that have excavation, paving, blah, blah, blah.
So what I'll probably do is type up exactly
Yeah,
what's there.
water
And then
for
when
community
put
garden.
something,
Right.
maybe flush it out.
That's good. But it blows my mind, but.
Deanie, I'm gonna stop the broadcast now.
Okay, so we're wrapping up the meeting because it's 10 after 4.
It'll come back to town, and the powers that be versus the money that's available and the.
When do we want another meeting, just to set kind of time?
Richard, are you in on the next one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Was this useful or was it
Yeah,
enjoyable?
absolutely. Yeah. I will be around next week, and I'll be away for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Next week. Do you want a more comfortable locale?
We can figure that out.
Okay.
I just want to have it on the computer next
Pull
week
my
if anyone's
calendar up.
free.
Just go to.
I'm stopping the broadcast.